Welcome back to another episode of My Soul Connection. I'm your host, Kay Kavert. On today's episode, we're diving into a topic that's both nuanced and profoundly transformative: psychedelic therapy, what it really is, how it works, and why it's becoming such a powerful tool for healing. I'm joined today by Nick Baker and Clare Johnson, two practitioners who bring a rare blend of clinical training, lived experience, and heart-centered presence to this work. Nick's path has been anything but linear. He's an ER nurse, certified coach, psychedelic guide, and retreat facilitator. After years of working in high-intensity medical settings, from emergency rooms to global humanitarian work, Nick found his way to ketamine-assisted therapy where something truly clicked for him. That experience led him into advanced psychedelic training through the California Institute for Integral Studies and eventually into guiding individuals and groups through deeply intentional, legal psychedelic experiences and integration work. Clare Johnson, a licensed therapist in Northern California, brings equally powerful depth and clarity to this conversation. Known by her clients for her uncanny ability to quickly get to the heart of what's really happening, Clare holds a master's in counseling psychology and expressive arts therapy from CIIS and is extensively trained in psychedelic-assisted modalities. She's MAP certified in MDMA therapy for PTSD and trained in ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, Psilocybin group therapy, and more. Clare's approach is rooted in helping people connect with their inner truth, their strengths, and the parts of themselves that are ready to heal. Together, Nick and Clare offer grounded, responsible, and deeply human perspectives on psychedelic therapy and how it can support profound healing when approached with intention, care, and integration. Before we begin, an important note. This conversation is intended for educational and informational purposes only. Psychedelic therapy is not appropriate for everyone. Any exploration of these modalities should be done safely, legally, and responsibly under the guidance of trained professionals and in accordance with local laws. Always consult medical or mental health providers when considering any form of therapeutic treatment. With that said, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Nick and Clare. Nick and Clare, so nice to see you guys again. I'm really excited to have you guys on, and I'm also legitimately nervous because it can be considered a controversial topic, but it's also a big share on my part. I think throughout this conversation, we're going to be talking about a lot of personal stuff for me. You just never know how that's going to land with people, but it's great to reconnect. So
thanks for having us.
Well, I wanted to start by just hearing a little bit about each of your backgrounds because you guys both have a really interesting way of kind of getting into this field. And so I'll start with you, Clare. I know that you are a marriage and family therapist, and you started to gain these additional certifications and education in psychedelic therapy. So tell me about what led you to that and where your practice is now.
Yeah, so I describe myself as an unlikely candidate to have gotten into this work. I was a trauma-trained therapist for about a decade, and working in kind of various community-based settings. I also had a private practice. And I had my own experience with psychedelics in a therapeutic setting about 8 or 9 years ago now. And that led me on this journey to, really want to go deeper and kind of study this as a healing modality. So I actually went back to school and got a degree in psychedelic therapy and research, which is where I met Nick. And we did that at California Institute of Integral Studies together. So that opened a whole new season of exploration into this work and how to use psychedelics as a tool for healing, which has been a great adventure and has led us into many, many interesting kind of discoveries. But in particular, we have training using ketamine, which is one of the legal options in terms of psychedelics. And we have training in that and using psilocybin in legal settings abroad, and then MDMA therapy with MAPS for the treatment of PTSD. So kind of continuing to dive deeper in all of these different areas. But it's been an amazing journey so far.
It seems like such a compliment to what you're already doing. And some people want to do traditional therapy. Some people won't have done that and they want to step out and try something new. And I'll talk about my own personal experience on that in a moment and how I got to attending one of your retreats and why I did that, but great that you've got it all covered. And Nick, your story is just interesting in life in general because you had such an amazing travel experience all over the world. You said you were living out of a backpack for 8 years and working as a travel and adventure guide, and then ended up going into ER nursing. So where did you take the leap from ER nursing into psychedelic coaching and as a retreat facilitator?
And my path is not a super logical one. You go all the way back to college. I was a graphic design major in school, and I never really had this impulse to get a serious job after college. As you said, I worked for this travel company for many years and lived out of a suitcase and traveled all over the world, doing hiking and biking trips, which is also something cool that I share with Claire, who also worked as a guide internationally for many years before.
Really? Wow.
It's kind of a little sidetrack, but it's one of the things that we love about hosting retreats is like we're used to holding groups, and that's like was a love and passion of ours before ever getting into psychedelic therapy work. But yeah, I eventually, after kind of traveling all over the world, I had this impulse to want to like help in a bigger, like more impactful way, and I had these visions of like working medically all over the world. And so I went back to school to become a nurse, worked in an ER for 10 years. And in that time was able to do really fun abroad things like working in Africa or spending time in Haiti after the earthquake. But the unfortunate truth was that I just really didn't like hospitals. I'm a very like aesthetic person. I love kind of like beauty, and I would have these moments in the hospital where like a lot of people that I worked with loved when it was really busy and chaotic. And I loved it when there was like hardly anybody in the ER
Yeah.
and chat with someone. I remember this one like 16-year-old person who was suicidal, and we had no other patients in the ER that night. And I got to sit with her for the whole night.
Oh,
Chat. And I remember her saying like, this is the best experience I could ever hope for coming to the ER. And it was like a night like that where I was like, I think that that's more like what I'm supposed to be doing,
yeah.
the hustle and chaos of the ER. And so I had searched around for all these other jobs in nursing, trying to find one that felt like a better fit. And so I tried out hospice, and I tried out working at San Quentin prison here in the Bay Area.
Right.
And none of them really felt like the right venue still. And then kind of by accident, I started working in this pain clinic that was treating people with chronic pain. And they had like this experimental side program where a couple days a week they were treating people with ketamine for depression. So these were folks who had tried SSRIs and they had tried talk therapy and were still remained actively suicidal. And I got to see how they were like making these really huge changes in their life as a result of this type of therapy. I had never even tried ketamine myself at the time. Was working as a life coach while I was a nurse, and I kind of had this idea of like, what about life coaching plus psychedelics? And
Especially with that nursing background too. That's just, you're such a caretaker as it is.
Right. So that around that time, Michael Pollan's book came out, How to Change Your Mind. If none of the people have ever heard of that book, there's also a Netflix series. It's really great starting point to learn more about this. I learned in that book that there's this program that Claire and I went to in San Francisco, teaches nurses, doctors, and therapists about the art and science of psychedelic guide work. That's where I met Claire. And as soon as I was in that program, I was like, here we go. This is it. This is all the stuff I'm looking for, and all the little explorations up until this point. And that's remained true, ever since then, for the last 5 years or so.
Wow.
Just feel like exactly in the right place. It's the perfect synthesis of all the other things that I've loved, all the way down to like creating the playlists for psychedelic journeys. Is like I've always been a music lover and a host of music gatherings, and so there's just like all these little pieces that kind of feel like perfect fits.
That's awesome. Especially, getting to be in a kind of nature setting when you're at these retreats. And yes, your music was on point at the retreat I attended. It was amazing. So I can tell there's a love there and a talent there too. Thank you guys both for giving us a little context to your backgrounds. I was a little hesitant to have an episode about this because it's so widely talked about now. You can go on to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and find probably hundreds or maybe even thousands of podcasts about psychedelic therapy. And not to mention there's documentaries, there's books, there's all kinds of stuff. So this is by no means a new topic. And I thought, well, how am I going to bring people something new? And I don't think that that's what I'm really intending to do here. I think part of it is sharing my own experience, coming from that kind of like black and white thinking type of person where I'm always trying to fix and solve my problems. Something happens in my life, I try to wrap my arms around it and just go into action instead of kind of sitting back and feeling. And over the last few years, as I've gotten more into that way of handling things and really paying attention to my emotions and processing them, I've come a long way in my own personal journey. But I want to share this with people because it was so life-changing for me. I mean, it was really something that moved the needle after I had already done so much work. And I never think I'm done with personal growth work, but I was kind of ready for that next level. And I was like, I don't know how to get to the next level. I don't know how to get any deeper. I don't know how to get further into my subconscious. And so part of this is to discuss that and explore it in a way that's careful. And I just want to have good intentions behind it, because I do not want to make anyone think that I'm out there promoting this for everybody, or that this is the type of thing that everybody should do. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's something you have to be ready for. And I think there is a certain amount of, preparation that goes into it that'll really make or break your experience.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
Can I say
And
something? Can I say a little something about
of
that?
course, please do.
Thank you for your courage and like sharing about your experience and this ancient practice. So, people going out, like say to do the vision quest
Mm-hmm.
and having an experience, and a key part of the experience is not that that's just for you, but it's you return to the village and you share what you got. So it's kind
Right.
of for everybody, not just for you. So I see you doing that in a really full way by, taking it the next step beyond just your own personal experience. And the other thing is, you are so not alone in this idea of, I've gotten a lot out, like foundationally, out of talk therapy,
Mm-hmm.
which engages mostly kind of the mind and the thinking, which is a really beautiful, necessary, portion of personal work. We're so not alone in this like sense that people have of like, I think there's something more. Like there's another layer in there that we're not quite accessing. And psychedelics are one way to access
Right.
it, not the only way,
Mm-hmm.
powerful one. But we like to, just like you, not be totally evangelical about it. But if you're feeling some kind of call or curiosity to,
Right. I remember you guys asking the group when we got to the retreat about their expectations coming in. What are you hoping to get from this retreat? And I remember sharing with the group. And by the way, there's times when you're like, what am I doing? I'm like in this gathering of about 15 people who I've never met before. And I'm about to unload some pretty heavy personal stuff. We'll talk a little bit about that group dynamic as we get further down the line, but I'd hear people talk about their expectations and their experiences and why they came to do this around the circle. And then it got to me and it's like, I didn't really have a real specific thing in mind that I was trying to accomplish. I think I said something to the effect of, I've been doing all this work all this time. I'm happier than I've ever been in my life, but I still feel like there's something I'm missing. I knew there was maybe something lying in my subconscious that I just wasn't able to tap into or acknowledge for whatever reason. And I felt strongly that this could be the thing that could kind of excavate some of that. And that's exactly what it did. I didn't know how it was going to. I didn't know what the outcome would be or what sort of topics would arise during my journey, but I knew that it would probably be pretty profound. And it was. And it was none of the things that I thought might come up. So before we get into some of the personal stuff, I do want to cover a little bit about the history of psychedelics, because I think that's important for some of the people who will be listening that have never really known how prevalent it was back in the 50s and 60s, when there was a lot of scientific research and studies being done on it, and a lot of, potential around treating depression and addiction and things like that. And some of these substances got into the underground, the counterculture, and kind of blew up in the 60s and 70s. And that's when our federal government stepped in and just put a stop to it all and started labeling them all as class 1 substances that didn't have any real medical purpose either. And they banned them. And all of the research came to a screeching halt at that point, which was really unfortunate. But things kind of picked back up more in the last decade or two. So I'm curious, with the new research that's coming out, now that it's being looked at again in a whole new light, are there myths that you want to dispel about psychedelics being used as therapy, or anything else that you're noticing out there as it's being discussed on a more, national level?
Yeah, like I said, it's a really interesting time to be doing this work. And, they are calling this kind of the third wave of the psychedelic renaissance, meaning we're getting kind of a new opportunity to look back into the research. And as you mentioned, there are podcasts and movies and books being written about this. And Nick and I talk a lot about how, it can often sound like psychedelics are, a magic pill, and that we're going to come to this work and kind of one journey is going to be, the switch that flips everything for us, and all the things we've never been able to see before or feel about ourselves will somehow magically be solved. And I think often we see people kind of come with these really big expectations of what a journey may be for them. And really, the way that we hold a lot of this work is that this is one step in a much larger story, a much larger journey that we're all on throughout our lives. And we really believe that people feel called to this work, that no one will really know that it's right for you except for you. There's a deep inner knowing that we have, a wise healer that's kind of starts speaking to us long before a journey. And it's our choice to hear that call and to kind of find the right set and setting, the right people and the right place to do that journey with. And that it will be, like you mentioned, Kay, like, not the journey that you expect, but the one that you need. And kind of the next step in whatever the larger arc of your healing journey is, like, what is it I am supposed to see now? Is the question that I sometimes arrive to journey with. Like, what can I know now, in this particular moment? So when we feel willing and ready to do that exploration, psychedelics can open that door for us. But they are never a solve all. It's a one piece of a journey that then is followed by a whole lifetime of integration, which we'll talk more about, of putting these things that we come to know and see more deeply into practice in our life, of like harvesting the gold of these journeys and living them out, in our day-to-day lives in meaningful ways. So, yeah, it's just an interesting time to be doing this work. There's certainly much more research being done. And we feel like the psychedelic movement is really kind of in its awkward adolescence right now, kind of stumbling in certain places and still trying to find its way. And that will be happening for sure, over the next many decades. But I think it's a pretty exciting time to be following this and to be learning more about consciousness in general, and the many ways that psychedelics can be applied in healing settings.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great points that you bring up, because while a lot of people were probably pretty excited about the movement and the direction that the industry was going overall, and that the research was being picked back up, it can be problematic for people that are just trying to find the one quick fix, or try to do things on their own and not in the right setting, not with the right people, not with, in a therapeutic kind of way. And it could actually make things worse for them before it makes it better. So it's really important for people to think through those things and make sure they are finding the right facilitators, and that they're doing it in a safe manner as well. Okay, so Nick, what about you? Are there any things that you're really excited about with this new, now that we're back doing this research again and that it's becoming more and more accepted, or anything that you think is misunderstood?
Yeah, maybe the most exciting thing is just more acceptance. Like, it's easier to talk to people about it than maybe 10 years ago. But something that's also really nice to remember is that the practice of using psychedelics for like insight and growth or spiritual connection is very, very old, very, very ancient Greece, in the jungle, thousands of years ago. This is a practice people have been using for a really long time. And so, sometimes we think about it as originating in the 50s or 60s, but that's just kind of where it originated, kind of reemerged into like Western culture.
Good point.
And, I think the pioneers there did a really great job of beginning a process, and there was probably some immaturity to the way that they were engaging with it. Some people were kind of like, let's put this in the water. Let's just like make everyone drink this and the whole it will change. But I think
we can use that right now, by the way, in the state of affairs in the United States, right? Just put it in the water.
You think if only it's that easy.
I know.
But
Sorry,
like we've
go
said,
ahead.
it's best when we come to this with like a true curiosity, that when it's the right timing for us. And so I think we learned a lot from kind of the immature ways that we brought this in originally. But it is really too bad that we didn't get a chance to keep going with the research happening, because we probably would have matured. The powers that be, I think, is like the time of the Vietnam War, people were starting really independently and have a lot of counterculture ideas. And, they thought this introduced too much chaos and created some really brilliantly executed campaigns to like people very scared about psychedelics and like they're going to rot your brain and you're going to jump off a building, you're going to stare at the sun and your eyes were going to rot out. And, it's true that these medicines can be really intense and powerful. But I think what's happening now is that we're kind of remembering that, like, in the right context, used in a really responsible way, these have big, big possibility for insight transformation. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention. Let's see if I can remember. Uh, hmm, I lost it.
Well, if it comes back, just
Yeah. Okay.
jump back in with it and, feel
Okay.
free. Something will probably spark your memory on that. So I want to transition into talking about how psilocybin in particular works in the brain. Psilocybin being kind of what people know as magic mushrooms, for those who aren't familiar with that term. Um, that was, the retreat I attended with you guys was psilocybin and ketamine. And I'll be honest, I haven't prepared a whole lot to talk about the ketamine side of things because you guys described it perfectly at the time, at least from my experience, which was, it was sort of a warm up, a precursor for the psilocybin. And so and in the moment, I found it to be very profound. And right after, as we were sort of digesting it and sharing what our experiences were, but the psilocybin for me was definitely the more powerful of the two. So I just kind of want to talk a little bit about how it works in the brain, but if at any time you want to just kind of add to about the psilocybin part of it, feel free. I mean, about the ketamine part of it. Um, so I just want to kind of put it out in layman's terms for people because I know people are always wondering how it actually works. I've heard people who don't understand the medicine say things like you're just, hallucinating and it's not real and what you're experiencing isn't real. And they have this perception that you're just having a one big giant hallucination. But actually, there is something happening in the brain where it temporarily changes how the networks within your brain communicate. And I'm not going to get sciencey because I'm not a sciencey kind of gal anyway. But normally, we have that default mode network that our brains, our system is tied to self reflection and remuneration, and it can become just overactive where you're just stuck into these patterns and ruminating on things over and over again. And psilocybin actually quiets that network and it increases the connectivity between regions of the brain that don't normally communicate. So it allows parts of your brain to talk to each other where it normally wouldn't have had the opportunity. And then it creates neuroplasticity where your brain's becoming more flexible. It's allowing people to see things in a different way or from a different perspective and outside of their old conditioning and patterns. So tell us a little bit about your just knowledge of this subject. And I know one of you guys, I think it was you, Nick, used a really good analogy at the retreat about a snowmobile or something creating new tracks. So I'd love for you to repeat that to the audience.
Sure. Analogies are helpful here. So the analogy we used, actually, I think first Michael Pollan used this one. I don't know
Okay.
where he got it from. Yeah, take total credit for it. But this idea of like a fresh layer of snow. So if you think about the thought patterns, the emotions that you usually feel as like well-worn tracks in the snow, they're pathways that have been traveled many times and they're kind of deeply ingrained. That a psychedelic experience can kind of feel like a fresh layer of snow where you now have kind of opportunity to carve new pathways. Might feel more novel or unique instead of kind of the same one. So the default mode network can kind of be thought of as like the brain's autopilot. It's just like it does on automatic. And those thought patterns can become kind of rigid. One thing that's really nice to include when we're talking about this is that it's not necessarily bad that we have regular thought patterns. Like we need that in the brain to like drive a car and do that without relearning it every single time.
Sure. That's a good point.
So this is a useful, a necessary part of the brain, but sometimes it can lock us into we have thought patterns served by having more flexibility. Another great analogy is like if you're looking at an overhead view of like a city grid and highways, it'd be like the main pathways. And sometimes we kind of think those are the only pathways that you can travel. The psychedelic experience would like open up all of the other roads and side roads and back roads as possible routes, and that different neighborhoods could talk to each other that maybe never had any connection to each other. After the experience, we kind of return back to the default, but we have an awareness of more possibilities.
Right. That's great. Great analogies. What about you, Claire? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I've been reflecting a lot lately on, this way of thinking of psychedelics as an interrupter of altered states of consciousness with other altered states of consciousness. So often people come to this work and they may be experiencing symptoms of anxiety or depression, very common, and I think of those as kind of two sides of the same coin. And, to reference, like, this is sort of what happens when we get stuck in rigid ways of thinking, right? Like that, we're sort of stuck in an altered state. And one of the things that psychedelics can do really beautifully is sort of return us back to like our factory settings. It sort of can interrupt some of those altered states of consciousness, meaning like we might get stuck in really depressive thoughts, or we might get stuck in worrying, and over worrying about things. And, you know, kind of interrupting that with another altered state can set us on a new path or a new trajectory, and happens in a really powerful way, and it stays with us. People are often surprised by how much of a journey they can still remember, how much of it you really bring back with you, and that you leave kind of feeling different. And then you're walking back out into your life, and like Nick said, all of your parts will come back online, the ways you're used to operating in the world, but you will continue with some fresh eyes, to continue seeing things differently. So yeah, that's a little thing
Great.
to add
Yeah,
there.
that's
Yeah.
a great explanation. And when we talk toward the end about the integration part, I'll share some of my personal experience with that because it certainly doesn't wipe away everything that you've learned all of your life. And uh, there's like these little reminders or things that pop into your head. Even gosh, I think I did that back in March, so it was quite some time ago now. In relation to how many things have happened in my life since then, but I do have like constant reminders of things that popped up, and I'm going, oh, I'm doing that thing again, and it's just allows me to kind of stop and remember what one of those other paths were. And just real quick before we get into any personal stories, let's talk about the safety aspect of it because that's always a concern of a lot of people. It was for me too, to be honest with you. I went into it with like, gosh, the last time I took mushrooms was when I was like in my early 20s, and I, don't know where they were harvested, and I don't know how much I was taking. I mean, it sounds so irresponsible to say that now, but it was still totally safe, even that, compared to a lot of things. But, I was very concerned about that. And when I started looking into your retreat in particular, and one of the things I read was that we were going to have a conversation. It was actually part of a requirement for to getting into the program. That I think Nick, you and I had a conversation up front to talk about any concerns I had, and for you to also make sure that I was there for the right reasons and with the right intentions, and we discussed some of the safety considerations. So you can comment on both the ketamine or the psilocybin or anything in terms of psychedelics, but whatever you have to offer there.
Yeah, maybe we'll focus on mushrooms, but real quickly, ketamine is this amazingly safe medicine. It raises your blood pressure just a little bit.
Mm.
Want to take it if you have really high blood pressure, but in other ways, it's like mixes totally okay with other medicines and really short acting. It's about an hour and a half. Um, but mushrooms similarly are physiologically so safe, incredibly safe. There was this really amazing study that you can look up. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes or something, um, that compared a lot of different drugs, like everything from tobacco and alcohol and opiates to mushrooms, LSD, and ranked them on terms of like harm to self and harm to
Hmm.
others, and kind of created a combined score for how risky they were. Mushrooms are dead last, the very bottom,
Wow.
of like
Okay.
physiological risk and risk to other people, in terms of like alcohol driving. So there's like some scientific proof to that, but also worth mentioning that, there is psychological risk. If it's not the right time in your life or things are kind of already too disorganized, it might not be the right time. They're very powerful tools. Sometimes we say like a knife is a powerful tool. You just want it wisely. But in terms of physiological risk, they're incredibly, incredibly safe. Like you've never heard of like birth defect ever happening from, a psychedelic or
Hmm.
mushroom. Of course, they haven't done total studies on those yet, but yeah, these medicines, when done in the right context, and with the right preparation and the right support afterwards, are incredibly, incredibly safe.
And I think the terminology you're using is so important, calling it a medicine, because it really is in this context that we're talking about. That's how it's being used, and that's how it should be used. You don't go out and get just like, you don't take other people's prescriptions because you have to have a doctor look at it and make sure that you're the right size and weight for that dose and things like that. The same thing kind of goes into this process as well. So I think that's good stuff and really important. Anything to add there, Claire?
No, I think most people worry just about the psychological impact, more than the physiological. I mean, it's certainly like a decent concern, but I think,
True.
everybody comes to these retreats wanting to know about the bad trip, and it's a question that we address a lot is, what if I start having a bad trip? And, the way that we think about it is there are no bad trips. There are just wrong settings, wrong timing, and kind of wrong orientation towards the medicine. So that is really a lot of what Nick and I do is to support people to really understand the experiences that they're having and to see those as like potential challenging moments within a journey where the medicine's presenting something for you to look at and work through as an opportunity rather than I took a bunch of mushrooms and went to a concert and then, started to have a lot of anxiety and it was the wrong place and it turned into a horrible night, and we hear those stories all the time from people.
Right.
But in this way, this is like the right place and the right context and the right way to think about having an experience like this is like, okay, how can I really process through some of this deeper material that's probably been underlying for a long time? And this is the right time to do it. So that's a lot of the preparation work we do with people too. So often people are really more worried about the psychological safety of mushrooms, coming into these
Yeah.
experiences. And it's totally normal to be nervous. I mean, I always think it's weird kind of when people are not, but to come with that
Yeah.
anticipatory anxiety of like, what am I about to do is the most human, experience you could have to say, actually, this is just reverence and respect for the medicine for what I'm about to do and how deeply I may open my awareness here. So, we're prepared and ready for that always too.
Yeah, and you're right that the preparation that you guys did with us was absolutely spot on because I was nervous going in, but I knew that it was likely going to be a challenging experience. And you talked to us a lot about what to do when we faced certain challenges within the journey. Let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, as I mentioned prior to the retreat, there was a long questionnaire that we filled out, a lot about our intentions and our expectations. And then we had the conversation ahead of time, Nick. But then getting there and having some group work and talking about all the possible things that could come up. I mean, everything from you might cry a lot, you might laugh a lot, you might have a lot of like, I don't know what I want to call it, like mucus and coming out at all at the same time. It's sort of like a cleansing. It can be kind of a physically cleansing process. And you might have a feeling of being really stuck for a while or something's really scary and to move toward it. I mean, I'm just throwing out a few things that I remember off the top of my head, but that speaks to going to the right facility too and looking for the right guides and facilitators because if you're just handed some mushrooms and like left to your own devices, good luck with that. I mean, maybe it'll be great, but I really wanted to have people there supporting me in terms of both the preparation and also during in case I did, have a moment and got really scared or nervous or felt out of control or whatever it was. So anything else you want to speak to about the preparation for your guests and going into it?
Yeah, you're speaking to what we call our flight instructions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, how to manage your experience. One of the things we say a lot is, that guide sometimes is the wrong word for this, position we're taking because we're not telling you what to do during the journey. Most of our guiding is before the journey, giving you all the tips and tools and mental preparation to be able to navigate yourself through
Hmm.
the experience. So that our role during it is way more kind of like a doula or a midwife to someone giving birth. We're like a calm, patient, supportive presence without directing your experience. Um, yeah, there's
Good
so many.
differentiator. Yeah, that's an
Yeah,
important point.
if anybody listening to this has ever given birth, you can attest to how horrible it would be having someone tell you exactly how to do it if it didn't feel natural to you. What you really need is like a stable, you know, patient, secure, confident presence with you to let you do your naturally evolving process. So yeah, we give you lots of tools, lots of preparation for how to navigate, including, what if you get paranoid? What if it feels really challenging? What if you kind of want it to be over and you still have 5 hours to go?
Mm.
Um, like how do you face all these things? And I'm really proud of like how we have evolved to, really narrow it down to what we think is the most useful bit of information that you can actually retain and go into. One example is like a little mantra that's so easy to remember, which is just the word yes. And this concept of whatever shows up, whether it's an emotion or a sensation in your body or visual, to be yes to it. It's like an improv game. It's like yes, yesing, and never blocking, avoiding, going the other way. That there's this magic that happens when you can go towards whatever shows up. So that's a little example of some of that.
Yeah, and that's a great one because for a lot of people and like throughout a lot of the work I've done on myself personally, it was had to be done because for so many years I was running away from certain emotions and feelings. I didn't want to see it. I was sweeping it under the rug, and I wasn't facing it. And actually that's the whole purpose of this, right? Is to your subconscious, allowing yourself to have your subconscious speak to you and listen to it and say yes to it and try to just be open to what it's trying to tell you. And uh, I know from the first moment that we took the mushrooms and I, had started to kind of go in after, I don't know what it took, maybe 10 minutes or so. As soon as I put that blindfold on and laid down, it was a pretty intense, heavy feeling for that first few minutes, and I think the first thing I thought was, "What the fuck did I just do to myself?" Because I remember you saying it could be 4 or 5 hours, and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm never gonna make it through this."
No.
And then it was the idea that, "No, I have to make it through this." I not have to, but well, I probably did think that at the time that I don't have a choice. I'm in now. And then all the little things started to kind of go off in my head of things you guys reminded me of, and one of which was say yes, and if something seems scary to you, go toward it. And the more that I did that, the more I would relax my body, the more that would unfold and happen. And it never got easy, but the less challenging it became, the less confronting. It was kind of more like this still is going to be deep and intense, but it's not going to feel so the best word I could think of was claustrophobic at the time. It was feeling very claustrophobic at first, and it really scared me. But the more I let go and kind of said yes to it, the softer and more gentle a ride it became, although still challenging. So,
Those initial chapters, even for very experienced people, there's always some form of like, this isn't going right, or this isn't how it's supposed to be. Uh, and yeah, that's one of the parts of our flight instructions is kind of the different chapters of the journey and how it's going to be different at each stage. And yeah,
right. Yeah, and I remembered you saying that too. It was kind of like, okay, this may be a tough chapter, but it will come to an end and another one will open. And the other one's not always necessarily less challenging, but there are definitely less challenging chapters throughout, and you kind of ebb and flow between them. And again, I'm only speaking for my own experience. I mean, some people may have had a completely different experience the whole time. So maybe Claire, you can speak to that a little bit too about the fact that how everyone's journey is going to be so different, and how do you prepare people for that? You obviously can't tell them what to really expect at the end of the day. You can give them the tools for once they're in there, but how do you properly prepare somebody for the fact that it could be all challenging or it could all be, fun and happy too? How do you set those expectations?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that Nick and I just like absolutely love about this work is that we are always left with like incredible sense of wonder and awe because we have seen many, many journeys and none ever the same, but each really beautiful kind of in this the unfolding of what happens and how we often come back to these central themes that are so similar, that kind of they're woven through all of these different stories. And there is no way to prepare people for what they're about to experience besides, some of this is just the deep art of surrender, and our trust. They're
Mm,
kind of borrowing our trust in the medicine that we know how deeply good it is and how the spirit of it is so healing. What psilocybin does in us is what it does in nature, which is decomposition of what's not needed and creating fertile soil for what is to come. And through our own practice with that and having seen it over and over so many times, I just trust it. And I know that what somebody's going to get is going to be good for them. I've seen that through and through. Yeah, if you're a first time journeyer, it's okay. You get to borrow our trust in that. And then I think people, know that in deeper and deeper ways, if they continue working with medicine over time. So,
Yeah. Well, I've only personally experienced it one time, but I have that trust wholeheartedly now. I remember saying at the end of the retreat that I think I'm good for about the next 5 or 10 years. I don't see myself needing this again, but no, I think I already have the itch again. And
Yeah.
not real soon, but I wanted to kind of piggyback on something you said too, Claire, was about the art of surrender. That really rang true for me because I had been working for a couple of years on my controlling nature. I'm a very easygoing person in a lot of social settings. Like if we've got a group of people that want to go out to a restaurant and somebody else wants to choose, I'm fine, whatever, I'll go with the flow. But when it comes to my life and the way I've got it planned out and something doesn't go right or something doesn't go right in my day, I used to get really stressed out about that stuff or control as it pertained to my kids, only out of, love for them and wanting to make sure I'm controlling what's happening to provide what's best for them, knowing that at the end of the day, we have to kind of let kids stumble and fail on their own some and then just be there to pick them up, right? But I recognized that with control was a big issue for me. And that was the one thing that was somewhat predictable is I had a feeling that that was going to come up during my journey. And it was a very powerful message to me from the very beginning. And I just kept remembering your direction to go toward it. And the more I did that and the more I like physically let go and just started to consciously try to relax my body and just stay open and not try to control what I was seeing or feeling, the less that I tried to control, the more the experience kind of just took over in a positive way and started showing me these themes that you mentioned. And so that kind of kept coming up throughout the whole journey as far as things would get tough again and I would notice myself starting to grip on and I just had to kind of surrender and let it happen and then try to just get the message that was being told to me in the moment as opposed to trying to navigate my way through it in a way that was going to somehow make me feel like I had control of the outcome. So that was really powerful for me.
Letting go of the agenda.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Right. One of the
yeah.
things, one of the analogies we use a lot is, if you were to cut your arm and you have like this laceration on your arm, that your body has this just like magical intelligence to it, that it
Mhm.
knows all the steps to go through to heal the wound. Um, and we're not in control of that. We're not thinking our way through it. We don't have an agenda about it. We can give it the right conditions, like we can put bandage on it to help it heal. But the body ultimately like knows the steps to go through. Psychedelic experiences really open us up to kind of surrendering control so the body can go to work and just do what it knows how to do in the order it wants to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that we've seen so many times, that we could never do that as well as the mushroom experience does it. So we kind of are also in this place of surrender when people take these things and just like trusting. We've turned out well so many times that we now kind of have this trust, deep, deep trust in it, especially when, like a journey doesn't really make sense right away afterwards, or doesn't feel really clear or useful or impactful in the moment afterwards. I'm seeing that like over time, like, oh, now it's starting to make sense to me, or I get why that happened, or to kind of like stick with the process. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's not gonna always be a lot of the answers you want right away, but it's trying to show you something that may work itself in at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and that's another interesting thing that I experienced myself was going into it, especially after hearing from the rest of the group and sort of some of the problems that they've faced in their lifetime and a lot of trauma and things like that. And of course, I won't get into any specifics. I There was a point at which I'm like, do I even belong here? I've never really had any major trauma in my life. I had a really stable upbringing. I had great parents. They're still married to this day, and everything was great. But I felt like maybe I was almost unworthy of being there, and I don't know if unworthy is the right word, but I just kind of felt a little out of place at first. But it was interesting how some of the themes that came up for me. One, for example, was about this shame I had been carrying with myself all of my life. And since I was about 15 or 16, and I had no idea that I was carrying it. And it came out in a way that was very profound because it was very clear. And I don't know if I'm sure everyone's experience here is different too, but I had a lot of very intense visuals where it's almost like people from my life would show up. And I guess I saw them, I saw a visual of them, but it was more of this intense feeling about that they just were in my presence all of a sudden. And it was all these people from my past, and some of whom were responsible for some really hard times that I had back when I was a teenager. And a lot of the choices that I made at that time were very bad ones, admittedly. My parents went through it with me. I put them through the ringer from about 15 to 17 or 18. But interestingly, I was kind of mocked for it for a lot of my life, even by my like my dad and my brother would kind of mock me for some of the boyfriend choices I had or whatever. And a lot of that came from a deeper place, from deep wounds, and I didn't know how to handle it at the time. I didn't even know that I had any deep wounds at the time, and so I would kind of go find respite elsewhere and not with the right people, and then I kind of got into a bad place in life. But anyway, where I'm going with that is, I got out of it and I survived and everything's fine, and I had, like I said, I had no capital T trauma, but it was enough to make me feel very shameful for a long time, and I just stuffed it down. Whenever the thoughts of this time in my life would come up as an adult, I would be like, "Oh, that's in the past. I'm over it. I'm over it." And I would sort of just brush it aside. I didn't give it a lot of attention, and I didn't realize how much it was, your issues are in your tissues kind of thing, right? It was really sitting with me and affecting the way that I felt about myself. And I think in a lot of ways, the way I treated people and others and patterns that I had in my life. So that was a real surprise for me that came out. I thought, gosh, I was not expecting anything from that time in my life. But I had this moment of like sobbing, and feeling at a point where I was forgiving this young girl who was myself back then, and letting her know that it wasn't her fault and you were just a kid. I was actually repeating that out loud. You were just a kid. You were just a kid. Giving myself some grace and forgiveness around the fact that, did I make some bad choices? Yes, but you were just a kid. Because I never moved on with my life thinking that, giving myself the grace that I was just a kid. I actually absorbed the negative energy from it and felt like it was all my fault. Just much like a victim in other sort of bad circumstances would feel like, they feel like it's their fault somehow. But the level of what came out of me at that point, the level of emotion that came out, the level of, just crying, like, I cannot believe I had that much pent up in me. And it really impacted how I felt about myself afterwards. I felt so much lighter coming out of it. Like I finally had let that go from my past and I finally forgave myself. So that was a big moment for me. Sure, have you guys experienced anything like that? You don't have to get into specifics, but anything like that yourself where you were just surprised that you were holding on to something from so long ago?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's been lots of discoveries. More commonly, though, I think when I journey, I often go in being like, okay, what's there that I don't know that's going to be scary? Like, where's the where's the closet with all the skeletons that I'm going to finally find it this time? And more often, I
Mm-hmm.
think what's revealed is things I already know, or, even how much light there is as well. Yeah, I certainly have confronted, parts of myself. And one of the analogies I use a lot is like, we all kind of come here pretty clean human beings in the beginning, and then we move through life kind of like we're like a pipe, and as we experience things, this pipe gets clogged and we don't even know really how clogged we are. But we have these experiences in life where we get triggered and things are kind of pinging off of some of that debris. And often these journeys are a way of kind of going in and cleaning through some of that, right? Of just like feeling these feelings we haven't had space or time to feel. And finally, there's an opening for that, right? And we can kind of feel some of that on the way out, right? Like, oh, there's the shame that I haven't touched into since I was 15 years old, but out here I was carrying it, and it's time for it to go. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness, a lot of themes of that, a lot of compassion. I think that shows up in these journeys.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kay, the thing that you said that I really want to normalize is this idea that, say you mentioned like when this showed up that you kind of just brush it aside,
Mm-hmm.
and how normal that is. Like often it's not the right time to address it, like you got other stuff to do. You have a job to keep, your relationships to uphold, maybe even like in a therapy session where it's only an hour long. Like, is that the right time to really get in there? Is there enough time and space to like actually get into the emotions of that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we believe in these retreat models so much, is that it's, it's a big chunk of time that you've taken out of your life to give finally the slowness and the space and the time for this to show up. And then with the assistance of the medicine as well, and the
Right.
support of people who were there to like professionally listen to that and hold space for that and normalize it. And it's kind of like your body recognizes when you're in a place where it's like finally the right venue for this to be addressed. Um,
Right. That's a really good call out because, yeah, most of us are operating in a very busy environment. We've got other responsibilities and things to uphold. So I think for me, it was the added element that I wasn't even aware it was affecting me so profoundly still. I just thought it was so far in the past that I'm past it, but it showed me that no, you have some, and I think there was a string of events where maybe that coupled with a couple of other things that happened in life, they kind of were all tied together. And it's like almost letting go of that, help me let go of a number of other things that were similar in nature too, maybe different circumstances, but still had to do with low self-worth or feeling shameful or not proud of myself. And yeah, it was a big release. And something you said, Claire, actually reminded me. You said sometimes you went in knowing what you wanted to work on, but what came out of the journey for you was something that you already knew about yourself. I think some of that came up for me too. Like I've known for a long time that I am a little bit of an overachiever. I'm an A-type personality. I like to get shit done. I'm like on the go, fast, fast, fast all the time. And I've known for a long time I need to slow down. And I've been really consciously focusing on that. And I've been trying to take on less, but I'm not very good at it. I still tend to overdo and take too much on. And that theme weaved its way in and out of my journey multiple times to the point that when we were breaking it down afterwards in a group, I said, I think I told the group the message that came loud and clear to me was I just need to do less. Like it's really simple. It was made very clear to me and it was really simply put, just do less. Like why are you working so hard and forcing your way through every part of life? And I knew I was deep down, I knew I was doing that. It's like I was fighting all the time with life and learning the art of surrender and then slowing down and just saying no sometimes or just choosing to go rest on the couch and close my eyes for 10 minutes was a better option than something else that was, productivity oriented. it, it's like these were things that I innately knew, but it took having the mirror put up in front of my face during the journey over and over again because, like I said, it weaved in and out. It was a theme that weaved in and out. It actually gave me a little bit more trust in myself too. It's like I knew that was there, but I was ignoring it. Now I'm paying attention more and I'm listening more to those little intuitive hits that I get. So I don't know if that's what you meant with your experience, Claire, but that's just what it reminded me of. So
Yeah, absolutely. Mhm.
I do want to share one other big theme that came up for me just because I think it's interesting going into this phase of my life. I just turned 49 over the weekend, so I'm facing down a new chapter in life, right, as a woman. And all the women in my circles are talking about this. It's like everything's about perimenopause and about getting older. And what do you do about, gosh, it's harder to stay the weight that you want these days. It's harder to feel good about yourself. All your sleep's disrupted, all this stuff that's going on in life. And I feel like one positive part of that in society is that people are talking about it more and it's becoming more of a very openly discussed thing. Menopause, we're not hiding behind it anymore. We're really trying to get out there and not hide or not be shameful about it. But it's still hard. It's a hard part of life. And I think it was something that I was really resisting, not menopause in and of itself, but just resisting going into that next chapter. Like I'm a very, very active person. I'm working out all the time. I'm on the go. I, when I'm 80, I want to be out hiking. I want to be doing yoga, those kind of things. And so there was this internal resistance in me to fight the aging process. And I even had some stuff come up for me around like body image issues that I had when I was younger, thinking that I had kind of like the other issue I mentioned, thinking that I had moved past that in life. Like, oh, I'm not trying to be, this perfectly fit person anymore because of outward appearance, or I'm not trying to, worried about every little thing I eat anymore. But I uncovered during that process that I was still holding on to some of that. And what came But it was such a bigger picture thing that came up for me around just moving into this phase that I'm really proud of being a woman who's wise and who's been through some stuff in life, who has something to offer to the world. And I'm not just a has-been who's been cast aside because she's about to hit 50 or she's not in her prime physically anymore or whatever. It came through over and over again, me embracing this next chapter and being excited about it. And I think I may have told you guys that this is kind of funny and embarrassing to admit, but when we were done with the journey and, we were all still feeling the medicine and everything, though it doesn't just go away immediately, but we were somewhat, back in control. And I went to the restroom and there was a mirror there and I looked in the mirror and I saw 3 different versions of myself flash before my eyes. So I saw the young Kay, and I saw the middle age, like where I'm at now, myself. Like I literally saw an old picture with no wrinkles, no this, no that, just like my old self and where I'm at now. And then it morphed into this older version of myself where I saw myself in the mirror as an older lady, maybe 70s or something like that. And it was so cool in the moment. I stood there and I really embraced what I was seeing and I wasn't scared of it anymore. It was like, this is freaking cool. There was an older woman in our group and I don't even know how old she was, but I think that she may have been about a generation ahead of me. And I was just really like locked in with her energetically during this journey to where all of a sudden she became somebody who was just this really powerful representation of what a woman should be at that age. And I looked at her and almost wept because I felt like, oh my gosh, that's me in 15 years or 20 years or whatever it is. And I had this sort of reverence for her. And it really helped me get behind this idea of no more quieting myself, no more being shameful about my age and I've never really been shameful about my age, but I mean, I was resisting it a little bit. Like, I secretly, if I told somebody how old I was, they used to be shocked and be like, really? You don't look that old. But now, now I don't get that shocked look from people anymore. I'm like, shit, I'm starting to look my age. And so I had a realization that it's like time to accept and embrace that and just be proud of where I'm at and actually kind of move into more of a leadership role with women in general. I had a very big theme about women in my life coming in and out of the journey where, not only am I so grateful to have the support system I have with all of my friends, with my female neighbors who were really tight, my mother, my grandmother, my aunts and cousins, but all the women I come into contact with on a professional basis all the time, and a lot of whom I mentor, and some have mentored me. It was just this overwhelming feeling of, what, like I'm ready for this next chapter and I'm going to make it count. It was actually part of what prompted me to finally get the guts to do this podcast. I felt I think was playing small for a long time and I just wanted to be like, I wanted to lead them in a certain way, but I didn't want to be known as a leader. Or I'm not doing this podcast because I'm hoping to be famous someday. It has nothing to do with it. But it gave me the guts and the courage to finally go, yeah, it's time. And people want to hear this stuff. And you're somebody who might be able to kind of bridge the gap between the young women and the older women and everything in between and help people find commonality and help us lift each other up and find ways to look forward to these next chapters at whatever age we're in. So that was probably the most profound part of my journey in terms of looking forward into my future.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
pretty
didn't know
cool.
that part. Thanks for sharing it. Yeah.
I hadn't heard the part about the mirror thing. I don't remember that part.
Yeah. Well, there was so much to share afterwards and, you only have so much
Yeah.
time between the groups. So
Yeah.
I know we need to wrap up soon, but speaking of the group, I do want to talk a little bit about the group dynamic because I am a group type of person. I like working on teams. I like working with other people. I'm not somebody who likes to be solo all the time. I mean, I like my alone time, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of power in a group and I like the energy exchanged in groups. And so I found I was excited about that part, but also a little nervous because you never know what you're going to get in a group. There could be a wild card. And we had a really, really cool group of people though. And I developed my own unique relationship with each of them and then together in community as well. And so I'm really curious from a therapeutic standpoint, what is your perspective on doing these kinds of things in a group setting versus solo?
This is a juicy one. This is,
Go
this is a
ahead,
big
Nick.
one for
Oh,
us.
go for it, Nick. You seem like you got something to say.
Yeah. First, we like to, just give, normalization to this idea that like, yeah, it's kind of weird to decide to come do this with a bunch of strangers. a lot of people, that's one of their first questions of like, wait a second, I'm supposed to do this with 8 other people that I've never met before. And who are these people going to be? And what's it going to be like to have, such a big personal experience with other people there in the room? And partially, we're never going to be able to explain the magic of it. You kind of have to experience it for yourself.
For sure. Yeah.
Um, but what we try to explain to people is that, one, it can be really nice to be around people that don't know you, that don't already have a formed opinion of you. It can be nice that people are seeing you with a fresh lens, so you kind of evolve into whoever you want to be. Um, the other is that there's just such a magic in the experience that you had. When you share it out into a group, it's going to land. It's going to be important some way to other people in the group. So the importance of having an experience and then having a group to share it with that all witness and hold you and see you is different than just reporting back to one therapist or guide. Um, and on the other end of that, the idea that you get to sit back and listen to other people's experiences. You're going to gain something from what they have experienced that might provide more insight into your experience or something you had forgotten about that they'll remind you of. Um, and then the other really big piece is that, sometimes we can have these big experiences on psychedelics. And then if you've only done that like by yourself with a guide or therapist, afterwards you went back to a family or community that doesn't really understand what happened for you. You can kind of feel very alone or isolated. So having a group there that has seen and witnessed and experienced your thing that you're going to stay in touch with after the retreat, really, I think helps metabolize the experience in a more natural way. And then maybe one other thing is that, people will ask, like, what if I'm like crying or laughing or something during the journey? That one's like also hard to explain. But when we're in this state, those experiences, the sounds, the noises, other people's experience will have an impact on you. And it can be really interesting to see what impact it has. It's going to be different for everybody. And so, like kind of how you were describing this older woman in the retreat and the thought you had about her, and how you wouldn't have quite been able to have that thought without another person there of her age. Um, Everyone becomes important in different ways. And there's this incredible feeling of camaraderie and closeness that comes being in a space where we're all going through something really important. And then all the downtime in between, where we're eating meals together and processing and having just, quiet reflective time together. All those moments are also really bonding. So yeah, I think we wrote on our website something like about 100% of the people come in saying like, what's this going to be like doing this in a group? And about 100% of the people leave saying, I cannot imagine this experience without the group.
Absolutely. Yeah. What would you add, Claire?
Gosh, the groups are just so special. I mean, we love every single one. And there's such a magic to who comes together. Like, it's some cosmic exercise of serendipity that we all need each other in these ways. It's such a parallel to life, that we are having an individual experience, but yet we are impacted by the experiences around us. And I think in that way, we talk a lot about the medicine of the psychedelic, but like we are medicine for each other. And I just see that, time and time again. Every single group is like totally magical. Yeah, I never tire of seeing just people I would never think would connect from really different parts of life or different places that they live and things that they do. There's such a sameness. It feels like psilocybin always wants us to remember that as our oneness, all the ways that we really this human experience has so much in common with each other. It's really a gift to get to see that over and over.
Yeah, it felt at times like there was this, somehow we were all personally chosen to kind of play off of each other in some way. Like when we first sat down and a lot of us talked, I don't think we talked a lot about what we did for a living, but it came up at times. But we were definitely a lot of different walks of life all over the country. We were laughing at one point about how, isn't it nice to be somewhere where it was a 3-night retreat and nobody brought up politics. We have no idea what you think about politics and what I think about politics, and we don't care. It's like this loving place to recognize each other as humans. But interestingly too, the other thing I thought of as you were talking, Claire, is that I found myself coming into the group with, and I noticed this about myself, by the way, right off the bat, is I had these little judgments that were creeping up about certain people. Like I would notice a thought come up when somebody was talking, and I'd sort of label them in my mind at like, oh, this is going to be that guy, or this is going to be that girl, or whatever. And those judgments, it was interesting, kind of came up in my journey as a personal reflection. Like it was a mirror for me on, how I was judging other people, because all this stuff was coming out about myself. And I definitely could see that I was projecting at times. And actually the older woman I mentioned was one of those people. I think I shared this with her, but if not, she'll hear about it and she'll probably laugh. But I had kind of these, I'm just going to admit I had like a few judgments around maybe she was taking up too much space in the room, or she was too talkative, or she was like just energetically she was in everything. And I was judging that at first. And then the more I got to know her, the more I realized what a sweet, wise woman she was, and what an amazing life experience she's had. And then next thing you know, I see myself in her, and I'm like, oh my gosh, those were all just projections of myself, because I've for years been holding back and not trying not to take up too much space in a room, or not to, just holding back from my true nature, because I was afraid that that's how I would be perceived. And here I am judging somebody else for that very thing. And it was really eye-opening, an eye-opening way to see myself. And I think that what you said too, Nick, is about you're coming not knowing anything about anybody and just being understood in a different way than you've ever been understood, and being heard and really listened to, because nobody's coming in with, they don't know anything about Kay Kavert. They're just hearing, the little bits and pieces I'm telling them. So there was a freeing feeling in being able to be really vulnerable and share things with them that I hadn't shared with even some of my best friends, or even maybe my husband, in the level of detail that I shared with them, because some of it's like embarrassing. I'm like, well, I don't know these people, so they can, I don't care if they judge me. And little did I know they would end up being an emotional support for me during that time. So it was pretty amazing. Wrapping up then, integration. There were integration days during the retreat after each journey. And I think we kind of covered that with some of the group dynamic and the sharing with one another and hearing each other's experiences. But integration at home was a big thing too, because like you said, Nick, people come home and they have lives, they have jobs, they have kids and families and things going on. And it's a pretty weird, surreal feeling to come, even just to drive home. I felt like my heart was just like exploding open. Like I was ready to just, love on everybody in my life. And of course, my kids just thought I went on a yoga retreat, but they'll probably hear about this later and I'll have to have a little talk with them. Luckily, they're 14 and 16, so they're probably able to handle it. Um, but it was a weird integration, weird in that it was just a bit difficult to navigate, but you guys gave us some amazing tools too. The integration guide that you gave us afterwards was really, really spot on. I love the analogy about when you get home and there's still laundry. I probably, messed up the actual phrase, the quote, but what
After
would you
the
say? Oh, go
after
ahead.
the the laundry, yeah,
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
it's a
So
book.
anything you want to comment on with regard to integrating back at home and how that looks, or what you can do to make it a little bit easier on yourself?
We talk a lot about integration because we really think that's, you know, 80% of what you can get out of one of these experiences is how you bring it back into your life. And, this is where we do our living. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, we call them hot tips for integration, little pointers we give people as they head back out into the world, and carry, these journeys with them. But so often it's just about the really small things that we do every day, like the choices that we can continue to make, small sweet steps we call them, in a new direction. And they may be really subtle things, like how we wake up in the morning, how we're approaching our day, and just the reminders we give ourselves that there's more that we're now aware of. I mean, it's a lifelong process, right? You'll really be integrating these journeys for the rest of time. They're journeys I've had, years and years ago that I'm still finding weaving their way through my life in ways that I couldn't understand fully at the time, but that make more sense now. And yeah, and it guides a new path. We often talk about that analogy that, if you're a ship and you've changed direction, you change course just, 1 degree in another direction, that where that leads over time is somewhere very different. So that's what we aim for. Sometimes not these huge sweeping changes and a huge overhaul of your life, or, ending a job right away or a relationship or anything like that, but just the ways that we choose to walk a little bit differently, through the same rituals. Um, in our families and in our workplaces as we head back out. So that's a lot of it. What would you add to that, Nick?
For me, integration, if I was going to do a broad sweep, would be kind of falls in two different categories. One is something that maybe you get some instruction of, like, I now have an awareness of, like, there's something differently to do in my life. Different way I want to show up. There's like you starting this podcast. Okay. It's like, I kind of got this instruction that there's something for me to step into and to do differently or to evolve into or create. And then there's this whole other category of just ways of being. And it might be, just an attitude or an emotion that we carry into a situation that's different. Not necessarily anything to do there. It's just a new level of awareness that we gain. So maybe the integration there is just like staying present and aware to that, that's something that you want to keep and develop more. I love this analogy of a stoplight where you have like green light, yellow light, red light. Some parts of a journey, you kind of know exactly what to do with them right afterwards, and they make sense to you. And it's like, that's green light. It's for like right now. Yellow light is kind of like, what was that? Like, I don't know what that was exactly. Maybe I'm going to give it some time to let it evolve and make more sense to me. Or I see that thing, but it's not for right now. Like, that's for later. And then there's these red light things where, like, what the fuck was that? Like, I have no idea what that meant or where that came from, and so that's kind of like, that's for later, but I'll keep it in my awareness. There are so many practices out there, that people, go to for integration, like breathwork, meditation, journaling, exercise. We find that it's really hard to recommend like one specific set of things for integration because, the types of journeys people have are so variable that the practices are just as variable. So we kind of default to deep listening to what people experienced and trusting them to come up with what feels like it applies to them for integration. We might help quarterback that a little bit, but mostly we kind of like direct it back to your own internal wisdom and intuition for like what feels like the next best step after an experience like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember the guide it was like a list of resources, suggestions, things to think about, but it was impressed upon us that there was no one size fits all, and you just kind of have to feel your way through it. But I definitely appreciated some of those resources. In fact, it's something that every once in a while I'll think, gosh, I want to go back and look at that to see what I want to dive into next. I know there was a podcast I listened to right away, or within, I don't know, a few weeks anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think I listened to anything actually for a little while after. I tried to take as much time. I want to say it was a couple of weeks, like not
Nice.
being on any social media. I didn't want to hear the news. I just want to kind of let my mind rest. And I had a lot sort of incoming from that was stirred up internally. It's almost like when you detox from like certain foods and stuff, it like stirs stuff up in you and can actually make you a little bit sick before you get better. It was kind of like that, where it's like it stirred up a lot in me and I had a lot to process already. So I didn't need any more incoming. So kind of going through a period of rest and taking it easy and stuff worked really well for me. But going back and just looking at the guide over and over again and just seeing what other onion layer can I peel back now from what I learned. And there are still to this day some new revelations that come up and little reminders and awarenesses, like you said. So pretty cool stuff. We're going to put a lot of information in the show notes, including your website, which is samesummit.com. And Nick, you'd mentioned that listeners can go on, say they listen to the podcast and get a password for the website. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we like our work to be like mostly referral based, like people that have, come through our network. And so we have a landing page that kind of gives some basics about the retreats. But if you want access to the full site, which does like, dates and prices and what it's like to be on a retreat and kind of every question you could ever ask about a retreat, there's a little form on there. You just give us your name and your email, send us a note, and we will send you the password to access the whole website.
Perfect. And I'll, of course, add each of your websites on there as well. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell the audience about, a way to connect with you or something to refer back to?
Two things I'd love to leave with is trust your own timing on this. It's not for everyone, first of all. But if you do have like a little morsel of curiosity to like let that evolve, we talk a lot about preparation, the journey itself, and the integration. And we love this idea that there's actually another step, which is incubation. It's like before actually deciding to do this, like it kind of has to like incubate in you a little bit and decide like, oh, there's enough curiosity here for me to look into it. So you don't have to have decided. That's another big piece. Go on the website, see if we feel like an intuitive match for you. If not, like there are other places you can go, other ways to do this. But you don't have to have already decided. You can like reach out to us to just talk more about it, continue that incubation process. And then the other big piece that I love bringing in is, we kind of have this philosophy, westernized way of looking at things as like, we have a problem and then there's like a cure for the problem. You have a headache, you take Advil, you have this pain, you take this medicine. It's like problem fix, problem fix.
Mm-hmm.
And, rightfully so, a lot of the research right now is like they're trying to normalize psychedelics by presenting it as a cure for depression or a cure for addiction or end of life anxiety. And that's all great, like big problem, use psychedelics. But there are so many of us that, like you said, like you didn't feel like you had a huge trauma to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
There's just like a sensation or curiosity. There's something more to explore there. There's like another layer of life, and there's not a huge problem in your life. That's a really great time to do something like this. Also, like you're in a stable place, things are going pretty well, and there's a sense that maybe there's something else to explore there. So you don't have to have huge, big capital T trauma or problem to get fixed. Like get something out of something like this. Yeah.
Right. No, that's exactly where I was with it. So I think that's very good advice. Claire, what about you? Anything to leave the audience with?
I mean, I think Nick covered that really well. We really, really love this work. We feel deeply honored that we get to do it and that we get to know people in this way. And we just are really appreciating you, Kay. It's such a joy to see your voice out in the world more. We just like cheering you on in such a big way, and such a pleasure to know you. So thanks for including us in this discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to have this discussion with you guys so long after it had happened, and because it was still so deep and meaningful to me. And so to share that with people, I think is going to be a really great thing, especially coming kind of from my background and perspective on life. It'll resonate with people and hopefully demystify some of the process and what to look for. So I appreciate you both. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to the next one, because I think there's going to be a next one for me. Don't know when, but I'm going to stew in it a little bit. So
Wonderful.
All right. Take care,
Yeah,
guys.
we can't wait.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of My Soul Connection. If you found the information useful, be sure to rate and review the episode and share it with others as well. And make sure you subscribe to the My Soul Connection podcast so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep connecting with your soul.